The night pressed down on the Pacific like a shroud, so thick and absolute that even the moon seemed to have abandoned the sky. Somewhere far from any shore, the USS Liberty's alarm klaxon shattered the silence, a metallic shriek that echoed through steel corridors and across the flight deck. Red strobes pulsed, painting the faces of the deck crew in flashes of blood. The automated voice cold, relentless began its countdown. 10, 9, 8. And as Maverick, now old and weathered, watched the memory unfold in his mind's eye, he muttered to himself, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. You'll want to see what happens at 1732. Trust me. He could almost feel the vibration of the deck beneath his boots. The tension in the air, so thick it was almost a physical thing. The carrier was running dark, every exterior light doused. Out there, somewhere in the black, enemy radar swept hungrily. And in the cockpit of a lone jet, a rookie pilot was about to face the kind of night that forges legends or buries them. He remembered the first time he saw her. She was just a kid barely out of flight school, with a call sign that made the old-timers snicker. Loop. Maverick had heard the jokes. In the ready room, the way the veterans rolled their eyes when her name came up on the flight roster. Loop's up next. Hope she doesn't get lost in the pattern again. She's got more simulator hours than real stick time. Bet she can't even land without the sun up. But Maverick, sitting in the corner, just watched. He knew what it was like to be underestimated. He'd been the hotshot once, the rule breaker, the one who had to prove himself every single day. Now, with lines etched deep around his eyes and a lifetime of memories weighing on his shoulders, he saw something in Loop, a stubborn spark, a refusal to quit. He remembered her first briefing. Loop stood at attention, hands trembling just enough to betray her nerves. The brass laid out the mission, a night patrol over hostile waters, routine on paper but deadly in practice. She nodded, jaw set, eyes never leaving the map. Maverick saw the way she memorized every detail, the way she mouthed the radio frequencies under her breath. But the others didn't see it. They only saw her mistakes. The time she overshot the carrier on approach, the time her comms crackled with static because she'd forgotten to switch channels. Each error became a punchline, and the laughter stung sharper than any reprimand. He remembered the night she sat alone in the mess, staring at her tray. He'd wanted to say something, to tell her that every great pilot had a rough start. But he knew words meant little in a world measured by performance. Instead, he watched as she pulled out her battered flight manual, flipping to the section on night operations. She read it over and over, lips moving silently, eyes burning with determination. He'd heard the stories from her instructors, how she'd grown up watching planes from her father's farm, how she'd built her own flight sim rig out of old computer parts. They said she was a natural, but raw, a kind of pilot who needed a little luck and a lot of grit. But what they didn't know was that Loop was building something no one could see. Every mistake, every joke at her expense became fuel for her fire. She was learning in the shadows, piecing together a skill set that would soon be tested in the most unforgiving crucible of all. Maverick remembered the way the squadron treated Loop. She was the outsider, the one who never quite fit in. The veterans had their rituals, their inside jokes, their stories of glory days. Loop was always on the edge, watching, listening, absorbing everything. She spent her off hours in the simulator, running night approaches until her eyes burned. She asked questions sometimes, too many, and the instructors grew impatient, brushing her off. But Maverick noticed the little things. The way she took notes during every debrief, the way she lingered on the flight line after everyone else had gone, tracing the outlines of the jets with her fingers, as if memorizing every curve and rivet. He saw her practicing emergency procedures. In the hangar, eyes closed, hands moving over invisible controls. He remembered a night when a storm rolled in off the sea, lightning flickering on the horizon. The other pilots huddled in the ready room, swapping stories, but Loop was out on the deck, watching the storm. Maverick joined her, standing in silence as the wind whipped around them. "You ever fly in weather like this?" he asked, voice low. She shook her head. "Not yet, but I will." He nodded, recognizing the hunger in her eyes. It was the same look he'd had once. Loop's story was one of quiet resilience. Her father had been a crop duster, lost in a crash when she was 12. Her mother worked 2 jobs to keep the family afloat. Loop had learned early that nothing came easy. She built her first flight sim out of scavenged parts, teaching herself to fly before she ever touched a real cockpit. Maverick saw echoes of his own past in her, the need to prove yourself, to rise above the whispers and doubts. He wished he'd done more to help her, to shield her from the worst of the squadron's scorn. But the Navy was a hard place, and sometimes the only way to earn respect was to take your hits and keep flying. But what they didn't know was that Loop's greatest strength was her ability to learn from failure. Every time she stumbled, she got back up. Every time they laughed, she worked harder. She was building a foundation, brick by brick, for the moment when everything would be on the line. The night of the attack, the carrier was on edge. Intelligence reports warned of enemy patrols, possible missile launches. The captain ordered a full blackout, no lights, no radio chatter, nothing to give away their position. The crew moved like ghosts, every sound amplified in the darkness. Loop was on the flight roster, her name at the bottom. Vapor, the flight lead, pulled her aside before launch. "Just stick to the pattern, Loop. No heroics. We're not here to win medals tonight." She nodded, helmet tucked under her arm, eyes scanning the horizon. Maverick watched her climb into her jet, every movement precise. The canopy closed, sealing her in a world of green-lit instruments and radio static. The launch was smooth. Loop's jet hurled into the night, afterburners flaring briefly before she vanished into the void. The deck crew exchanged glances. Some muttered bets on how many times she'd have to wave off before landing. Maverick just watched the sky. Silent up there, alone. Loop felt the weight of every eye on her. The night was absolute. Her only companions the glow of her HD and the distant, reassuring blip of the carrier's beacon. She checked her instruments, then double-checked. Her breathing slowed, focus narrowing to the task at hand. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have guessed, was that the night would come when every eye on that carrier would turn to Loop. And in that moment, all the mocking would fade, replaced by a single desperate hope that she could do what no one else could. The darkness outside was total, the kind that erased the horizon and left only the faint glow of instruments for comfort. Loop's hands hovered over the controls, every muscle tense. She'd flown night sorties before, but never like this, no. Radio, no lights, no backup dots. Suddenly, a burst of static crackled in her headset, then silence. Enemy jamming. Her link to the carrier was severed. Panic threatened, but she forced it down. Maverick remembered how she drilled for this, alone in the simulator, practicing lost-come procedures until her fingers ached. She flicked to the quants. Emergency channel, keyed the mic twice her signal to the carrier that she was still airborne, still fighting. But what they didn't know was that Loop had a trick up her sleeve. She'd been tinkering with her night vision system for weeks, tweaking the gain, adjusting the filters, chasing a sharper picture. The others had laughed, calling it a waste of time. But tonight, it was her lifeline. She flipped the switch, the Z, world outside her canopy blooming into eerie green clarity. The ocean's surface shimmered, and there, just at the edge of her vision, she caught the faint outline of another aircraft, running dark, no transponder. Enemy. Her heart hammered. but her hands stayed steady. She banked away, keeping her distance, watching as the hostile jets circled, searching. Luke knew the carrier was vulnerable, unable to launch more planes without giving away their position. She had to buy them time. She dropped lower, skimming the waves, using her night vision to track the enemy without being seen. It was a dangerous game. One mistake, and she'd be a blip on their radar, a sitting duck. But Loop's instincts, honed in those lonely simulator hours, guided her dot. She sent a coded burst on the emergency channel, hoping the carrier's comms officer would catch it, a warning enemy aircraft in the area. Then she did something no one expected. She looped behind the enemy jet, using the darkness as cover, and flashed her landing lights. Just once, a split-second signal. The enemy pilot, startled, broke off, banking hard away from the sudden flare. Loop used the distraction to slip back toward the carrier, hugging the black water, invisible, except for the faint glow of her cockpit. Back on the carrier, the comms officer caught her burst, relayed the warning to the bridge. The captain ordered a full blackout, every system locked down. The enemy jets, finding nothing but darkness, circled once more before fading into the night. Loop's small victory went unnoticed by most. She landed smoothly, guided by her night vision, touching down with barely a whisper. The deck crew looked up, surprised to see her back so soon unscathed. Vapor grunted, offering a grudging nod. Not bad, Loop. Not bad at all. Maverick, watching from the catwalk, allowed himself a rare smile. He knew what it meant to win a battle no one saw. To come back from the edge with nothing but your own wits and nerve. But the victory was short-lived. Loop sat in the ready room, helmet resting on her knee, sweat cooling on her brow. The debrief was quick. Vapor, the flight lead, barely acknowledged her. But Maverick noticed the way her hands trembled slightly, the way she stared at the flight deck as if willing herself back into the sky. He remembered his own first-night mission, the fear and the exhilaration. He saw the same storm raging inside Loop. She was still the outsider, still fighting for every scrap of respect that the carrier's tension mounted. Reports came in enemy bombers, likely with anti-ship missiles, heading straight for the group. The blackout remained. No radar guidance, no deck lights. Only Loop's night vision system and her instincts. But what they didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The real test was still to come, a test that would push Loop and everyone aboard that carrier to the very limit. The hours dragged on. The ocean remained a black void, the carrier a silent fortress. Maverick, recalling that night, could almost taste the tension in the air, a mixture of fear, hope, and the metallic tang of adrenaline. The crew moved in. Hushed tones, eyes flicking to the radar screens, waiting for the next move. Suddenly, the alarm blared again, this time, sharper, more urgent. A destroyer on the carrier's flank picked up multiple incoming radar contacts. Enemy aircraft closing. Fast, the captain's voice echoed through the corridors. All pilots to stations. This is not a drill. Loop's heart pounded. She was still the lowest-ranking pilot, but the flight roster was thin, 2 senior pilots down with mechanical issues, another grounded by a medical emergency. Maverick remembered the look on her face when the CAG commander, Air Group, pointed at her. Loop, you're up. Night intercept. You're our eyes. She suited up, every motion mechanical, her mind racing through procedures. This time, the stakes were higher. Enemy bombers, likely with anti-ship missiles, heading straight for the carrier group. The blackout remained. No radar guidance, no deck lights. Only Loop's night vision system and her instincts. She launched. Into the blackness, the carrier shrinking behind her. The radio was alive with static, voices cutting in and out. She switched to her custom night vision loop, the world outside transforming into a surreal landscape of green shadows and ghostly silhouettes. The enemy formation appeared on her, Scope 3 bombers, flanked by 2 fighters. Loop's orders were clear: intercept, identify, and if necessary, engage. But she was alone, outnumbered, and invisible. She throttled back, using the night as cover, closing the distance. Her hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting the night vision, gain, scanning for threats. She spotted the lead bomber, its profile unmistakable against the sea. But what they didn't know was that Loop had spent weeks studying enemy tactics, memorizing their patterns, learning how they moved in the dark. She anticipated their turns, predicted their maneuvers. She crept closer, heart hammering in her chest. The enemy fighters peeled off, searching for threats, but Loop stayed low, hugging the water. She keyed her mic, sending coded bursts back to the carrier enemy position. Heading, altitude. The carrier's defense teams sprang into action, prepping countermeasures, but they were still blind without Loop's eyes. She had to hold the enemy at bay, buy precious minutes for the ship to prepare. Suddenly, a warning light flashed. One of the enemy fighters had spotted her, breaking formation and diving in pursuit. Loop banked hard, the G-forces pressing her. Into the seat. She dodged, weaving through the darkness, her night vision painting every wave, every shadow. The enemy pilot fired, tracers slicing through the night. Loop rolled, barely avoiding the barrage. She pulled up, climbing into the black sky, the enemy on her tail. But what they didn't know was that Loop had one final trick, a maneuver she'd practiced in secret. A loop-the-loop in total darkness. Using only her night vision as a guide, she pitched back, the world spinning, stars and sea blending into a blur. The enemy overshot, losing her in the chaos. Loop leveled out, breath ragged, sweat pouring down her face. She was still alive, still in the fight, and the carrier, for the moment, was safe. But what they didn't know was that the enemy wasn't finished. More contacts appeared on the scope, closing fast. The real battle was just beginning, and Loop was their only hope. The sky was alive with shadows, the radar screen glooming with hostile contacts. Maverick, in the control room, remembered how everyone fell silent, eyes fixed on the lone blip that was Loop. She was the carrier's last line of defense. One rookie, alone against the night. Loop's voice, calm but urgent, crackled through. The emergency channel? She relayed enemy headings, altitudes, even coded warnings about missile locks. The carrier's defense teams, guided by her updates, launched countermeasures blindly into the darkness, trusting her instincts. The enemy bombers began their attack run. Loop could see them now, 3 silhouettes racing low over the waves. Missile bays opening. She had seconds to act. Maverick recalled how she didn't hesitate. She dove, rolling beneath the lead bomber, her night vision painting every rivet, every shadow. She fired 1, 2, 3, her missiles streaking through the night. The first bomber erupted in a fireball. The second veered off, engines sputtering. The third lined up for a kill shot on the carrier. Missile away. Loop pushed her jet to the limit, afterburners roaring, chasing the missile's heat signature. She fired her last missile, a desperate shot. For a heartbeat, nothing happened then. The enemy missile vanished in a blossom of flame, high above the deck. The deck crew erupted in cheers, but the fight wasn't over. Enemy fighters swarmed, searching for Loop. She dodged, weaved, her night vision flickering with static as she pushed the system to its breaking point. One by one, she outmaneuvered them. Using the darkness as her shield. Her jet took a hit. Warning lights blared. Smoke filled the cockpit. Maverick remembered the fear in the control room, the captain's hand gripping the rail. But Loop's voice came through, steady as ever. "I'm bringing her home." With instruments failing, she lined up for the carrier. No lights, no guidance. just memory and instinct. The deck loomed ahead, a black void. Maverick held his breath as she touched down, her wheels screeching on the deck, her jet skidding to a halt. The crew rushed to her, pulling her from the cockpit. She was exhausted, battered, but alive. The captain saluted her, the crew cheered, and even Vapor managed to smile. Maverick, watching from the shadows, felt a swell of pride. Loop had done what no one thought possible. She'd saved them all not with bravado, but with preparation, grit, and a quiet courage that shone brightest in the dark. He'd seen a lot of pilots in his day. Hotshots, legends, heroes. But that night, he learned something new. Sometimes, the ones everyone doubts are the ones who save the day. Sometimes, the quietest voice is the one you need to hear. So if you ever find yourself in the dark, remember. Loop, remember what she did when no one was watching. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of courage, grit, and the unexpected, join the squad. Click subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next.